In a busy city where no one stops for strangers, a little girl stood silently with a handful of daisies. She wasn't selling flowers for fun. She was fighting for something far greater, her mother's life. But when a cold-hearted millionaire known for never caring about anyone crossed her path, something unexpected happened. This is not a story about money. It's a story about a child's courage, a stranger's hidden kindness, and how a single moment can change two lives forever. Stay with me, because today you will see how a girl with daisies taught a powerful man the true meaning of love, hope, and humanity. Brina stood very still at the corner of the quiet street, her tiny fingers wrapped carefully around a bundle of white daisies. The petals trembled slightly in the breeze, but not more than her fragile hands. Her shoes, once white, were now gray with dust, the soles almost tearing apart. Her little dress had lost its color, yet she stood with a kind of nobility, like a child who refused to surrender. She wasn't like other children running with laughter, clutching ice creams or balloons. She wasn't dreaming of toys, candies, or ribbons. No. She stood there with a purpose far beyond her age. Every step she took had a reason. Every breath she drew carried weight. Her mother's weak cough still echoed in her mind. Each sound felt like a clock ticking down. The small apartment they lived in felt colder each night, its silence broken only by the painful breathing of the woman who meant everything to her. Brina's lips were dry, but she whispered anyway, "Please, someone, buy my flowers." It wasn't a plea for money, it was a plea for time to save the only family she had left. People walked past her without a glance. Their polished shoes clicked on the pavement, sharp and uncaring. Some looked away, uncomfortable. Others pretended they didn't hear. Brina didn't cry. She only tightened her grip on the daisies. She remembered how she picked them that morning, stepping carefully through the field so she wouldn't damage a single petal. She had washed them with water from a broken tap. She had arranged them neatly, hoping someone, anyone, would see their beauty and her need. But hour after hour, no one did. Her stomach growled, but hunger didn't scare her anymore. What terrified her most was the thought of going home empty-handed, facing her mother's pale face and whispering, "I couldn't get the medicine, Mama." A breeze brushed her hair across her face. She brushed it back with a gentle motion, as if every gesture needed to be calm, strong, grown up. 5 years old, yet holding the pain of 50. Her mind drifted to her mother's hands, the way they used to braid her hair, wipe her tears, hum little songs while preparing soup. That same gentle hand now trembled, struggling even to lift a glass of water. The wind carried sounds of laughter from the other side of the street. Children with backpacks, mothers holding their hands, families living normal lives. Brina watched quietly. She didn't envy them. She only wished for a moment that someone would notice the daisies. One by one, the sun's golden rays softened, turning the evening sky into shades of pale orange. Shadows lengthened. The streets were thinning. The world was moving. But she stood still. "Someone, please," she repeated, her voice fading like a candle's final flicker. Then finally, a car slowed down. A dark, luxurious car that didn't belong to this street. Its tires whispered against the pavement. The door opened and a tall figure stepped out. Polished shoes, tailored suit, a presence that drew quiet around him. He wasn't like the others. Brina didn't know his name. But destiny did. He approached not out of pity, but curiosity. He came to buy flowers, but would soon discover he was buying something far greater, an awakening of humanity buried deep inside him. The sleek black car glided to a halt, its glossy surface reflecting the fading evening light. As the engine settled into silence, it brought with it an unexpected pause to the world around. People kept walking, unaware that fate itself had just stepped onto the pavement. The door opened and Susan emerged, immaculately dressed, sharply composed, a man carved by discipline and crowned by success. His world knew him as a figure of steel. He wasn't the type to stop for strangers. Emotions to him were distractions. Time was money. Compassion was weakness. Yet his gaze locked onto her, a tiny figure, barely standing. A child, not even tall enough to reach his waist, clutching a fragile bouquet of daisies as if it were life itself. No mother beside her, no guardian, just loneliness wrapped in dignity. He had seen begging children before, but there was something different. This child didn't beg. She stood as if she had made a promise, not a plea. The cold breeze tugged at her faded dress. Her lips trembled but didn't open unless necessary. She didn't call him. She didn't reach out. She simply waited. Her silence was louder than words. Susan's footsteps echoed as he approached. The people around barely noticed, but the child did. Brina lifted her head slowly, unsure whether hope should rise or be crushed again. "How much?" he asked, his voice deep, controlled, businesslike. She blinked once, surprised. No one had spoken to her all day. I just need enough for Mama's medicine," she whispered, each word slipping gently, not desperate, but brave. It wasn't the voice of a beggar. It was the voice of someone making a trade with life. Susan studied her face. Her cheeks were pale, her lips chapped, but her eyes, those eyes, held an ocean of strength. No tears, only determination. "I'll buy them all," he said, expecting a relieved smile. But she didn't smile. As he reached for his wallet, ready to hand her more money than she had ever seen, something unexpected happened. She shook her head. "No, sir, not too much. Just enough for medicine." Her small voice wavered, not from fear, but from principle. Susan froze. He had seen greed. He had seen lies, but never this kind of honesty, so raw, so pure, it felt unreal. He extended the money again. "Take it. You can buy food, clothes, everything." She stepped back, clutching the daisies. "Mama will get better. I only need enough. I don't want extra." That moment struck him deeper than any storm. A millionaire, surrounded by wealth he no longer felt. Standing before a little girl who refused to take more than she needed. Her dignity shattered something locked inside him. She gently placed the flowers in his hand as if entrusting him with something sacred. "Please, they're special. Don't let them fall." He stared down at the daisies, simple, white, fragile, just like her. He didn't ask her name. She didn't ask his, but fate had tied a knot between their souls. He walked away with daisies in his hand, unaware that his feet would soon turn back. Something unnamed was pulling him, toward a broken door, a silent home, and a truth he wasn't ready to face. Susan stepped back into his luxury car, but for the first time in years, he hesitated. His fingers rested on the steering wheel, yet he didn't start the engine. Inside his chest, something strange and unfamiliar stirred, something no board meeting, no stock market victory had ever awakened. "Just enough for medicine." Her words repeated like a whisper echoing through empty halls. He had dealt in numbers his entire life, millions, profits, contracts, but never had he met someone who placed moral value above money, especially not a child, fragile yet unbroken. He stared at the daisies still resting on the seat beside him, simple, untouched, purposely gathered. They suddenly felt heavier than gold. He exhaled, long, controlled, but troubled. "Who are you, little girl?" he murmured to no one. His chauffeur asked, "Sir, should we leave?" Susan didn't answer. Instead, he pushed open the door and stepped out again. "Follow her," he ordered. Not out of duty, but out of something deeper, something he couldn't name. The car moved slowly behind the child, who walked with tiny, careful steps, clutching a single coin tightly in her palm. She didn't skip. She didn't run. She walked like someone carrying responsibility, not childhood. She entered a part of town Susan had never seen. The streets narrower, the buildings older, their walls cracked with stories of silent suffering. He kept his distance, watching as she crossed a broken courtyard and entered a building where windows were shattered and curtains hung like tired spirits. There were no lights inside, not even the warmth of a flickering bulb. He approached cautiously, his polished shoes now standing on worn-out concrete floors. From inside, he heard it, a cough, weak, painful, prolonged. He stepped closer. There she was, Brina, kneeling on the floor of a dimly lit room with peeling walls, dust-covered shelves, and a mattress so thin it barely deserved the name. "Mama," she whispered, brushing a trembling hand across her mother's forehead, "I sold the flowers. You'll get better." The woman, pale as moonlight, forced a smile. "My brave girl." Susan stood at the doorway, frozen, his breath caught. He had attended charity galas, donated large sums, received applause, but he had never seen poverty this real, this silent, this dignified. No cameras, no speeches, just life, fighting to stay alive. There was no father, no food, no light. Only a child guarding hope like a knight guards a kingdom. This wasn't charity. It struck him with full force. This was humanity. And for the first time, Susan felt something cracking inside, the armor he had built around his heart. He didn't know it yet, but he had already crossed a line between witnessing pain and choosing to heal it. He could leave, but he wouldn't. Because what waited next was a plea unsaid, a night that would test his soul, and a choice that would change all three of their lives forever. Susan stepped quietly into the dim room, his shadow stretching across the frail figure on the floor. The fragile air trembled with the sound of shallow breaths. Brina spun around, fear flooding her eyes. I didn't steal, I promise," she whispered, her small voice cracking like dry glass. Susan knelt, lowering himself to her level, not as a CEO, but as a man stripping away power. "It's okay," he said softly, his tone unrecognizably gentle. "I'm here to help." She didn't believe him. Children like Brina had learned the world didn't come with kindness. He approached her mother. One glance and a shock of reality hit him. Fever burning through her skin, sweat beading across her forehead, pulse weak and fluttering like a candle in the wind. He felt an ache in his chest, a feeling he had denied for years. Without hesitation, he pulled out his phone. "Come now," he ordered his private doctor. It was not a request. Brina's tiny fingers clutched his sleeve suddenly. Her hands trembled, but her eyes were steel. "Please, don't take Mama away," she pleaded, her voice shaking with terror at the thought of losing the only person she loved. Susan looked at her, and something inside him, something long dead, rose again. "I won't," he promised quietly. "I'll bring help to her. She stays here." The child's grip loosened. She trusted him, not because he was rich, but because his eyes, for the first time, held truth. Minutes felt like hours until his doctor arrived, arms full of blankets, medicine, care. They brought warmth into a home that hadn't felt it in months. Brina watched every move, eyes wide with both fear and wonder. She stood defensively at her mother's side, a warrior in a faded dress, refusing to leave her post. The doctor checked vitals. "Severe fever, malnutrition. She needs rest, food, warmth," he said, glancing at Susan. Blankets were laid. Medicine administered. Warm broth poured into a small cup. Brina knelt beside her mother, whispering, "Mama, wake up. He's helping." Her mother's eyes fluttered open weakly. She looked at Susan, confused, grateful, ashamed. She could not speak, but tears formed. And then Brina's voice broke through the silence. "Thank you, sir. You saved her." Susan stood still. A CEO who had been applauded on stages, awarded for achievements, celebrated in magazines. Yet no thank you in his life had ever pierced so deep. He turned away slightly, not out of pride, but to hide the unfamiliar burn in his eyes. He couldn't speak. His throat tightened. His chest ached with something beyond understanding. For the first time, he felt the weight of a child's faith placed upon him. A tear, real, heavy, and long denied, fell silently inside him, even if not on his cheek. He could have left that night, but he wouldn't. Because with one whispered thank you, Brina unknowingly unlocked a door in Susan's heart. And now he would step through it, into a life he never planned for. Days passed, but something had changed, not in Brina's home, but in Susan's heart. He found himself returning again and again, not out of duty, but out of a pull he didn't understand. The man who once rushed through life now slowed his steps when approaching a worn-down door at the edge of town. He never arrived with grand gestures, no cameras, no charity speeches. He came quietly, carrying warm bread, fresh soup, medicines, and soft blankets. But never pity. He respected them. That mattered. Brina greeted him each time with eyes that lit brighter than any chandelier he had in his mansion. She began to wait by the window, small hands pressed against the cracked glass, whispering, "Maybe he'll come today." He brought her little treasures, coloring books, crayons, even a pair of shoes that fit her delicate feet. But what she gave him in return was priceless. She drew daisies, page after page, white petals, yellow hearts, standing tall. She pressed each one into his hand. "Flowers for you," she giggled, proud. And for the first time in his life, a millionaire CEO stood still, receiving flowers from a child who once had nothing. He would keep them, study them, tuck them secretly into his briefcase before board meetings. No one in his glass office tower knew that, in between contracts and deals, he looked at drawings of daisies. In those moments, he remembered something he once had and lost. Brina's mother, growing stronger day by day, watched silently as the man who saved her life repaired broken shelves, replaced flickering bulbs, even fixed the window so the cold wind would stop biting her child at night. He never stayed long, yet his footsteps echoed hope long after he left. One evening, as the sunset painted the room in soft gold, Brina reached out and placed her tiny hand inside his. Her fingers were warm, trusting. "When I grow up," she said, voice soft but certain, "I'll help children too, like you helped me." Those words, they didn't just touch him, they unmade him. He stared at her, this little warrior with daisies in her soul, and something stirred across his face, something rare, something forgotten. He smiled. A true, unguarded human smile, not the polite smile he gave at galas, not the practiced one for corporate photos. This one came from deep within, a place he thought was gone. Brina laughed. "You look better when you do that," she teased innocently, and he realized. He had everything money could buy, but only now, with a daisy drawing in his hand and a child's hope in his heart, he felt rich. But love is not about giving. It's about belonging. And soon, Susan would face a choice, not to save a life, but to become part of one. A choice that would forever change what family truly means. Months passed, but the bond only grew stronger. Brina's mother slowly healed, her strength returning drop by drop like dew on dying leaves. Susan didn't announce his help. There were no charity headlines, no cameras, no speeches. He didn't rescue them to possess them. He empowered them to rise. He offered Brina's mother a job, not out of pity, but dignity. He knew true healing begins not with gifts, but with respect. She trembled when she received her first paycheck. I earned this?" "Yes," he nodded, "with your own strength." Brina was enrolled in school, her name written neatly in fresh ink for the first time in her life. The day she wore her new uniform, she ran to him. "Do I look smart?" He knelt, eyes soft. "You look powerful." Weeks turned into seasons. Winter melted into spring, and daisies bloomed once more. The school announced a small performance. Parents filled the hall with flowers and applause. In the third row, silent and still, sat Susan, the billionaire no one recognized, his eyes solemn but proud. The stage lights rose. Brina stepped forward, holding a bouquet of daisies. Her hands trembled, but her voice Her voice shook the room. "These flowers saved my life," she began, clutching the petals close. "Not because they are pretty, but because someone noticed me when the world didn't." Every whisper faded, every heartbeat paused. "I had nothing," she said, "but he saw me, and because he cared, I am standing here." Tears slipped down his face, unashamed. He didn't move, didn't blink, just felt. She didn't mention his name. She didn't need to. Her words were not about a man. They were about humanity. In that hall sat people of every race, every class, every story. Some wore silk. Some wore sorrow. But tears united them all because kindness speaks one language. A teacher whispered, "Who is she talking about?" No one answered, because it didn't matter. The message was beyond identity. You don't need wealth to change a life. You don't need power to rewrite someone's tomorrow. You only need a heart that notices pain and the courage to act. That day, Susan learned something he spent fortunes searching for. The richest people are not those who own treasures, but those who give love. The hall stood in silence before erupting in applause, not for a performance, but for truth. Brina walked off stage, daisies shaking in her hand, and ran into his arms. For the first time, he hugged someone. Not to protect, but to belong. No media knew. No headline told this story. But it lived forever in every soul who heard her words. Because compassion is the only wealth that multiplies when shared. Ending message to society. In a world divided by walls, race, class, color, it is not money that heals. It is love. And somewhere on a forgotten street, a little girl taught a millionaire how to be truly rich.